Our next story is just freaky, is the only word I can use. Just abysmally freaky. And it's in relation to assisted suicide, physician-provided suicide, and different forms of suicide that governments around the world are now already providing, and potentially other governments may be planning it into the future. This is an article by Vanessa Beeley in The Wall Will Fall. Canada's expanding euthanasia laws making the unthinkable thinkable again. So this is really, Vanessa is focused on the notion of eugenics here, and the idea that there appears to be a global movement that has been successful in some countries that is encouraging the widening and expanding of euthanasia laws to the extent that people with mental health problems, people who are just feeling suicidal, rather than receiving treatment, are receiving suicide assistance and a direct suicide from the state. Let's have a look at this. Death Reborn, Canadian Medical Assistance in Dying, MAID. In 2016, Canada, with Justin Trudeau's administration in office, passed Bill C-4, legalizing medical euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, together referred to by Canadian public bodies as medical assistance in dying. By November 2020, more than 19,000 individuals nearing the end of life had been voluntarily euthanized. In March 2021, the law was amended by Bill 7, which permits assisted euthanasia for patients whose death is not reasonably foreseeable. In 2021, it's estimated that more than 10,000 people were assisted in killing themselves in Canada. We'll read it on a little bit more. Now, this is a quotation from Psychiatrist Journal. I'll get the name of it. I can't remember exactly what the name is off the top of my head. Currently, several countries such as Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg and Switzerland allow patients who are suicidal to receive death by either lethal injection, euthanasia, or a self-administered prescription for lethal medication, assisted suicide. In 2002, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, all three being collectively known as Benelux, legalized both these practices. Laws in these countries were permitted voluntarily death for patients whose physical or psychological suffering was unbearable and could not be effectively treated by means that were acceptable to them. A terminal condition was not a necessary criterion. Now, this is where it gets really worrying. People with mental health problems who are not in a position mentally to decide what's best for them. And quite often we have laws, in fact, that allows psychiatrists to determine that. But here we have a situation where people with psychological suffering that was unbearable and could not be effectively treated by means that were acceptable to them. How many mental health patients at one point in their life did not want to take medication at the beginning? They were afraid of different things, that it would dope them up and things like that. I know two cases of people who got very positive, progressive lives, who at one point had mental health problems, schizophrenia in one case, and initially did not want or believe in their medication. But they were convinced over time, and they're doing really well now. And they actually have a full life. And yet we have a situation where in a number of EU countries currently, if you're suicidal and you don't want to take medication, there is a means by which you can get the state to help you switch yourself off. I think that's a shocking development. In July 2022, the London Free Press published an article by 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 entitled Medical Assistance in Dying Overused in Canada Even Before Expansion. 𝐀𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 gives clear examples of MAID abuse based on evidence provided by doctors, a patient, and family members. Here's two examples. A man was admitted to hospital after suffering a small stroke affecting his balance and swallowing. He was feeling down and isolated due to a COVID-19 outbreak on his ward. The stroke neurologist anticipated he would be able to eat normally and regain most of his balance. Psychiatry diagnosed an adjustment disorder, but noted his prognosis was very good. The patient then requested MAID. Neither of his MAID assessors had expertise in stroke rehabilitation and recovery. Because he was temporarily eating less, the MAID assessors decided he could die right away, instead of waiting the required 90 days for those living with disabilities, despite having no terminal comorbidities. He received medical assistance in dying the following week. The man died alone and depressed, and before he had tried proper therapy or reached maximal recovery. Here's the second case. A 71-year-old widower was admitted to a southwestern Ontario hospital after a fall. His family says that during his admission, he contracted an infectious diarrheal illness. He was humiliated by staff for the smell of his room, his family said. He developed a new shortness of breath that had not comprehensively been assessed. In this context, a hospital team member suggested he would qualify for medical assistance in dying. The team said he had an end-stage chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and it was terminal. The patient was surprised by the diagnosis but trusted the team. Within 48 hours of his first assessment, he received a medically assisted death. Post-mortem testing showed he did not have end-stage COPD. His family doctor, when notified of his death, also stated he did not have end-stage COPD, but the team had failed to contact her when they were assessing the history. What do you make of that, Padraig?
So everything you've described there is quite shocking, Finbar. So normally what would occur to me straight away is the source, so how solid and reliable is the information that's coming. So I can't say I know much about the source, but would you stand over the origin of it to a degree?
I would stand over the origin of it. Vanessa Beeley herself is a fearless journalist. In terms of the last quotes, they come from a psychiatrist, from an organization, a representative organization. Before coming on to put this on the show, I did do my own research into this. This is a fact. This is reality. One of my concerns would be the abuse of this. The idea that, to my mind, there's a form of eugenics in here. When I align this with other policies that are developing in EU countries and outside of the EU, such as the Down syndrome-free approach of some countries to birth defects, if you want to call it that, such as Down syndrome, where they're allowing abortion up to full term to ensure that their population is cleansed. And I don't use that word, but it's a word that has been used in the past, cleansed of defects. And when you put it all together, it is a worrying development. And it seems to be a functionalist scientific approach to life, which looks at life in the terms of health or non-health, but also in terms of contribution to society. And that's where my concern is.
I suppose the only insight I have into this, Finbar, is I would be friendly with a guy who I think it's a major factor in it now, to be honest. Like he would describe himself as atheist, and I think that is a big factor when people are talking about end of life situations, because Anton coming from a kind of a background of Christianity or any religion really, like probably has issues with that, because they would probably believe that they don't get to choose those sort of things. But this guy that I know, the way he looks at it is in terms of like humanitarian end of suffering, stuff like this, where his approach to it is, if he ever got to the stage where he was badly incapacitated, that this is something that he would want. So he would actually advocate for the law to be changed in a very kind of liberal sort of a way. Now, like you say, I would agree. The real scary part is who would be the authority over this type of thing. You're talking about the medical infrastructure of the country and the legal infrastructure of the country. Both places I wouldn't have any faith in ethics, and they haven't got a track record of it. Even when you look at, I think there was a bit of deception in the 8th Amendment campaigning that happened here. There was a lot of people's good nature was probably pushed on for really difficult situations where they were advocating for, in the case of, say, rape or incest or something like this. This was an awful lot of the persuasion that was going on at the time, and a lot of people found it very difficult to argue against that, not in a liberal kind of late contraceptive way. So where you start out and where you end up is a major concern. So if you open the door here, it may sound very humanitarian and caring. Where do you end up? So that's the big concern too. Like, so it's an area I don't know much about, and I wouldn't have looked into much, but those are just the things that strike me.
I think the expression is the thin edge end of the wedge, isn't it? That they'll get something in the door so that they can swell it and exaggerate it and bring it in more fully. An example would be, I just read a post today. I didn't get a chance to really look into it in detail, but apparently there's pushes now to raise the limit for abortion in Ireland beyond 12 weeks. So that's a concern as well. You know, it was voted on not very long ago at all on the basis that it's 12 weeks. Now they're trying to, now that they have it in the door, they're trying to raise that up as well. I'll go back to me point, Padraig, in relation to, there's a big difference between somebody who has been told and is pretty clear that they're going to die soon and it's going to be painful or whatever the case might be, and that they make a decision to end their own life with assistance. There's a big difference in that and people with mental health issues. Who defines what a mental health issue is, for a start? Because there are new mental health definitions and so-called conditions being developed every year by within the DSM, or every 4 or 5 years within the DSM. So it's worrying from that point of view. But also, as I said before, I've known people who've been in the depths of mental health trauma who are doing really, really well now. But I wonder if this option was put to them and if it was encouraged to them, because remember, I think there's a financial aspect to this in terms of certain elements that would promote this. It would save money from the government, having to care for people, having to provide somebody with schizophrenia, for instance, having to provide them with medication throughout their entire life. So I'd be concerned that there's too many interested parties here who would not be encouraging these laws for the best reasons or for the best interest of the patient.